What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? It's your boy Chris Style. You are tuned in to Arrowhead Chief Podcast, episode 119. Free agency has kicked off. Chiefs have made a move, has signed somebody, has gave another player a message, clear message. We're going to get into it. We got a special guest coming on today. Let's talk Chiefs.
Yeah, Arrowhead Chiefs. It's your girl, Miss Nicole. Queen of Hustle, baby. Started from the bottom, now we here. My homie at the start of his career. Let's go. Try to warn him early, hear the truth. Tune in every Sunday for the juice. Arrowhead Chief Podcast, bringing all the news. If you missed the play, come back for reviews. Chris Style, out here rapping for the crew. Post game highlights, go subscribe on YouTube. If you missed the play, come back for reviews. Post game highlights, go subscribe on YouTube.
What's up, everybody? What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? We are back, episode 119, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. Free agency is kicked off, and we've made a move, made a big signing the other day. Brett Veach goes out, gets a left tackle. We're going to talk about all of that. Before I get into that, we got a special guest coming in, Caleb Jacobs of ArrowheadPride. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem, man. Appreciate you for coming on, giving us your time. Before we get into the signings and free agency and everything, tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a writer over at ArrowheadPride. I've been there since about December. I kind of started out posting like film clips and everything to Twitter when I was writing for Arrowhead Live. I do some podcasts here and there, a lot of film work. And I played football for a long time growing up and into college. So that's kind of how I learned about the game. And I'm just kind of like sharing what I know with everybody now. Okay.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. And how did you link up with ArrowheadPride?
You know, I got offered a position by a couple of the guys that worked for them there. It was kind of just out of the blue. So I was surprised by it. And I'm, just happy that I can be a part of, I think, one of the best Chiefs websites in all of the kingdom, really. I think it's one of the biggest ones. So I just try to have fun with it every day.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're part of probably the biggest publication as far as Chiefs Kingdom goes. For a minute, for a long time, that's what it was ArrowheadPride. So for you to be a part of that, it's got to be pretty special. So free agency has kicked off. We've made a signing, Jawan Taylor, 4-year deal, $80 million, $60 million guaranteed money. What are your thoughts when you first heard this signing come across your screen?
I was a little bit surprised by it. I thought Taylor was a guy that the Jaguars might try to retain on their roster since he is only 25 years old. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he just came off of a really good season and he really hadn't been on any teams that were that great, with those first few Jaguars teams he was on. He didn't really have much great coaching, but he gets, some help his first season there. They start teaching him, some things he might not have learned the first 3 years, and he turns in a really good season pass protecting wise. So when I saw it, I wasn't shocked, but then when they started saying stuff about him playing left tackle, I kind of started to get more surprised off of that. But really, it does make sense with his athletic ability and the fact that he is only 25, that they can think, maybe if they get him in the Chiefs system, they can help elevate his game higher than he's been able to in Jacksonville.
Okay. And when you saw the film, what are some of the traits that you saw from him?
He is a great pass blocker. That's the first thing that pops out. It's kind of funny. I mentioned this. I don't think his run blocking is very good at all. And really, it's funny because when you see the offensive linemen, the easier thing for them to do a lot of the time is run block. It's hard finding tackles that can consistently pass protect. He's kind of like, this oddball amongst like the offensive line community. The fact that he is probably, I think he was one of the best pass protecting right tackles and tackles in general in football in 2022. Yet when you pop on the film, he leaves a little bit to be desired in the run game. I think a lot of that has to do with the coaching, like I mentioned, though. But the Chiefs threw, Patrick Mahomes attempted the third most passes. Trevor Lawrence attempted the seventh most passes in the NFL this past year. So he's got experience pass protecting at a high clip. It's not like was in some offense in Jacksonville that they were trying to run the ball 50 times a game or anything like that. He's used to being able to keep a guy clean in the pocket, and a guy like Trevor Lawrence has to kind of rely on being in the pocket more than Patrick Mahomes does. So you can see where it kind of works out why the Chiefs would have been in on him.
Okay. And what are some cons that you see in his game that may, give you a cause to pause on him?
So I don't think he necessarily handles some power rushers very well. I think there's some of those guys that he's a lighter guy. He's only like 310 pounds. He's rocked up. He's pretty built though. But Chris Jones, he played a couple of nice snaps against him in the regular season, and so did Dunlap. They kind of just used like their length and strength and everything to bull rush him into the quarterback. Max Crosby had a couple of reps like that. So, that's just a couple of things to work on. And then just like the overall run game and angles in space when it comes to that kind of blocking, he needs to improve on.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you think he has the necessary tools to move to the left side?
I definitely think he does. And the first thing I look at when I'm looking at offensive linemen a lot of the time is their feet. And he's got awesome feet and pass protection. They're quick. He's not out of control. He's concise. And really, he's got the foot quickness that maybe a guy like Orlando Brown didn't possess, where Orlando's more of a heavy footed guy, kind of used his big frame to win blocks. Taylor doesn't have that big frame, but what he does well is he can mirror up all these defensive ends with his footwork and with his technique and pass protection. So even though Brown had the experience on the left side, I almost think Taylor's athletic and physical gifts would make a transition from right to left almost easier full time, especially in the Chiefs offense.
Okay. Speaking of Orlando Brown, were you surprised on how the Chiefs didn't franchise tag him?
I was very surprised. I was pretty shocked at that, to be honest with you. I thought we were looking at a situation where they were for sure going to tag him again, maybe take a guy in the draft. But there was like a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, there was no situation where I didn't envision Orlando Brown back in Kansas City. I was shocked by that, to be honest. Still am a little bit.
Yeah. Are you shocked by the reports of teams saying that they view him more as a right tackle, and that's why he's not getting a lot of big offers out there?
It's surprising, and I think it's a little more complicated than just that. I just don't think teams want to pay what he's been asking, because there is, he's a good player, but for what he was asking for is like top 5 money for left tackles. And I don't think teams want to pay him left tackle money. I think they want to pay him a little bit less to be just a good player on the right side. They don't want to pay him to be an elite. They don't want to pay elite left tackle money for a good left tackle. They'd rather just pay that money for a guy that you say, yeah, he'll be our right tackle for 3 or 4 years, but he won't be great. He won't be bad either, though. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Okay. Do you think that he'll get, where are some places do you think Orlando Brown could get, some offers from?
I think the hot name is the Bears, just because they had all that money laying around. They had a rookie left tackle last year from Braxton Jones from Southern Utah. He honestly had a pretty good season for what they do and for what he does. He's a big, strong run blocker, also needs a little bit of development and pass protection. I think he'll have a much better season. I think Ryan Poles up there, he's an offensive line guy, so he has an idea. Maybe some other landing spots or destinations. I could see him up in New England potentially. They've run the ball a lot, power run game up there. I'd like to say almost Baltimore, but we know he's probably not going to want to go back there.
Yeah.
I don't know if Atlanta has signed Caleb McGarry yet, but it'd be interesting because really Atlanta's been running the ball a lot more. I could see him going down there maybe. And maybe Houston, just so that they can throw someone, another big body. If he were willing to play right tackle, by Tunsil, just get another big experienced body out there, help protect for the quarterback they may draft. But those are maybe some of the teams I think.
Do you see a scenario where maybe the market isn't, to his liking, and maybe he goes back and says, I want to come back for the Chiefs and play?
Yeah, and when they first announced the thing with the tag, I was kind of like, well, they're going to let him shop around. He might not get what he wants. And I said, there's a chance he ends back up in Kansas City on like another 1 year, 2 year, like a smaller deal than
Mm-hmm.
what he wanted. I don't think that's completely out of the question, even though the Chiefs have mentioned a lot about Taylor being able to play left tackle. I think that's just kind of trying to display the versatility that he has with his game. I don't think they're necessarily saying he's going to be one or the other, because then that would pigeonhole them into other teams would kind of know their needs. They'd know what they're up against, either the draft or the remaining parts of free agency. So I could definitely see Brown back, maybe on like a 1 year kind of another prove it deal. I don't know if he'd necessarily want that, but then again, if he's not getting his offer anywhere else, maybe it would be best to come back, familiar system. You're friends with everybody in the organization. You just want a championship with them. So
Right,
he might decide, maybe this is the best move. Maybe I'll come back here and get a 2 year deal, and then we'll re-up again at some point.
right, right. So with now the Orlando Browns are going to, for right now he's not going to be the left tackle. We got Jawan Taylor being on the left side. Now Andrew Wiley, he goes to Washington to be their right tackle. Um, are you comfortable with the right tackles on this roster, or do you think they need to draft somebody?
I think almost that they're going to draft somebody. And the reason for that being, they got 3 guys on roster you kind of take a look at. You got Lucas Niang, who they wanted to, develop. He started quite a few games in 2021 for them. Obviously, he has been very injured throughout the course of his professional career.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Prince Tega Wanago, who's done some spot duty here and there. He's been mostly a special teams guy, spent a lot of time on the practice squad. They're familiar with him, but he's never had to play any big time reps. And then they've got Darian Kennard, 5th round draft pick from Kentucky. With that group, I think Niang is the best player out of that group. The only problem is they just don't have any guarantees with him with his health.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be willing, I think that they would probably, be looking to add again in the draft. I don't know necessarily 1st or 2nd round, but
Mm-hmm.
at some point I feel like they could take a developmental tackle.
Okay. Okay. If Niang can stay healthy, do you have confidence in him that he can man that right side?
His film really wasn't that bad from 2021. He went against, in the games he played in, he went against quite a few good pass rushers, and he gave up a couple of sacks. But really, when you're going against, Joey Bosa, you're going against Crosby, Khalil Mack, you're going against quite a few. And he even went against some of the guys from the Eagles also, not Hassan Reddick, but he went against some of those guys from Philadelphia in 2021, and they held their own pretty well. I'd be fine with that. It's just the thing with injuries and, big guys, once they get hurt they, injuries tend to follow them through a lot of their career. So they don't want to be in a situation like 2020 where everybody gets hurt and all of a sudden you're like signing guys off the street days before the Super Bowl. You want to be able to have good depth throughout the offensive line room. And to be honest, I think it's a good idea just to draft an offensive lineman every year of Mahomes' career, just so you can constantly make sure he's always going to be protected.
Okay. All right. Well, going into free agency, what are some moves that you're looking at that you would like the Chiefs to make in free agency?
Some moves that I would like. Well, I saw like an hour ago, Samaje Perine got picked up by the Broncos, so that stunk because I really liked his game.
Mm-hmm.
I've liked him this entire time he's been with the Bengals, and I was kind of like, well, maybe we can go grab him, but they didn't get that. I've seen a lot of the receivers are starting to go today. honestly, at this point, I'm seeing Lazard's contract and I'm seeing these other guys. I'm starting to think it might not be too hard to get Juju Smith-Schuster back in here for something that I think would be fair for both sides for who he is as a player. He's not going to be that number one guy, but what he does well is, he can fill in. He could be a number two guy in an offense, and they can put him opposite of Travis Kelce. And when Kelce draws a lot of attention, he can be a reliable, 800 yards to 1,000-yard receiver in a season. So, I mean, I'd be interested in trying to bring Juju back. Really, I don't really know. There's not too many other like free agents. This class was pretty weak. A lot of the big name guys have already gone off the board. So maybe like Taylor Rapp from the Los Angeles Rams. He's a free agent. I was like, well, Juan Thornhill hasn't been signed. There hasn't been much safety movement. That's not really been talked about a ton, but I maybe keep an eye on that, or maybe they decide to bring Juan back also.
Right. Now, also with free agency, then we got some guys on our roster that need extensions. Chris Jones, he's put it out there that he's not going anywhere. He's a Chiefs for life. We'll see. What is interesting to see, with that contract, especially seeing what Deron Payne got with his contract. Javon Hargrave, he got a big contract over the 49ers. So it'll be interesting to see what Chris Jones gets. But there's one player on this roster, L'Jarius Sneed. Seeing that we didn't go and franchise tag Orlando Brown, and with of course Chris Jones hovering, would you go ahead and extend L'Jarius Sneed now?
I would go ahead and do it. I think he is more of a key in this defense than people really realize from the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of in a way this year took over a lot of what Tyrann Mathieu did the previous 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of a role is so valuable to Steve Spagnuolo. And the great thing about a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, you can still, he's still a very young guy. He's a young player and he's still ascending in a lot of ways. I'd go ahead and lock him up now just because, also with him in the slot, that gives you more of an option to play McDuffie to the outside. And just it gives you the versatility Spags likes to run with all these different sets. Maybe they don't sign Juan Thornhill and they can't draft a safety. You're in a situation now where Spags might be scheming up some looks for Sneed to maybe not play safety all the time, but maybe just kind of do it, play a little bit more in the nickel as kind of more of an up high guy, some situations like that, because you have all these other cornerbacks that can do different things. But overall, just for the structure of the defense, I think he's important. He's earned it. I think it'd be the right thing for the Chiefs to do to give him an extension, either, this offseason or just re-sign him next offseason. But now feels like it'd be a nice time.
Okay. With them not re-signing Frank Clark, restructuring his deal, should I say, letting him walk, cutting him, letting him walk. Are there some other veteran defensive ends that you would bring in during this free agency period?
Well, I saw Marcus Golden got cut from Arizona. He's always been a real solid player throughout his tenure. I think he'd come in and kind of do like what Carlos Dunlap did a little bit. I kind of liked Zach Allen I liked Zach Allen. He got signed by the Broncos also, of course.
Yeah.
And then, I saw Calais Campbell got cut. Maybe look into that. A guy he could play a little outside, a little inside. I'd honestly be fine with bringing back Carlos Dunlap. I thought he was fine for what he did in his role this year. And then who else? There was some. I'm trying to think. Oh, yeah. Maybe Chiefs fans don't like him very much because of the playoff game, but Arden Key is a free agent. He's another guy that could provide, some defensive in depth. He could probably come in and provide some help also.
What is your feelings on somebody like a Zadarius Smith?
Oh, yeah, that's right. He did just get cut. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he comes in. I think they would use him a little bit like Dunlap. You're going to play Karlaftis a lot more on the early downs, and then you're going to put him in. It's third down and medium, third down and long. Just let him do what he can do to get after the passer, kind of save his snaps a little bit. He is an older guy. You don't want to burn him out too early. And hopefully, if they can find some production with a guy like that, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, he would be a dream, Joe. Um, Now back to the wide receiver room. I know this wide receiver group is not, sexy at all. So a lot of these guys are, probably second receivers, maybe even third receivers. So, but Odell Beckham Jr. Now he's asking the prices he's asking for 15 to 20 million. I don't personally think he's going to get that. I think he's going to get a reality check and he's going to have to take a 1 year prove it deal. But what kind of contract would you give an Odell Beckham?
Man, I saw the reports you did. He wants like 15 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, he's over 30 and he's had a real bad injury history the
Mm-hmm.
last 5 years. I don't think any team would give him that. Maybe that's the number they want to start at.
Mm-hmm.
I would do something maybe like a 1 year deal for like $10 million,
Mm-hmm.
something along those lines. You're paying Marquez Valdez Scantling, basically $10 to $11 a season. I think that'd be somewhere in the range. You're paying Juju. You know, you're not gonna overpay though for a guy that hasn't played in over a year just because he looked really good running around in shorts and a t-shirt. That's crazy
Right.
that he was gonna try to get that. And I get it. The last time he was in pads was in the Super Bowl. He was scoring touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
He was making Eli Apple and the Bengals secondary look pretty bad in
He
that
was.
game.
He was.
He
He
was
was.
having a game before his injury, and he was having a heck of a season. It's just at that age, though, and with his injury history, I don't think you can afford to get wrapped up in a big deal like that.
I agree. I agree. Um, Now there's been talks about DeAndre Hopkins, and I know that he's in the 30 range, but for he had the suspension with the steroids, the PDs, but when he came back, he was still pretty productive. I mean, to have what 60, 70 some catches, 700 yards, and a few touchdowns, it's pretty good to only play like 9 games. Especially when his quarterback was in and out of the lineup. He's mostly playing with Colt McCoy and other quarterbacks. So what draft capital would you give up for DeAndre Hopkins?
I think I would probably give up like a third or a fourth, and then maybe just throw on one of those other seventh round picks to be nice. I don't think the Cardinals have been pretty pat. They want a second, and when you start getting to like what you specifically want like that, all the other teams are just going to kind of undercut you. You say we want a second, you're only going to get offered thirds and fourths, and then
Mm-hmm.
like I said, maybe another late round pick, maybe a late round pick for the next season. I think a lot of it has to do though with that they've got to take on the contract too.
Right, right.
That's really the big thing with all this. So I think like a third round pick or a fourth round pick would honestly be fair considering that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm pretty for sure he's going to try to restructure his deal because he has no more guaranteed money. So that will probably play a big part in trading for him. What he's asking for, as far as restructuring his deal. So let's get into the combine was just passed up. So we seen all the prospects go out there and put on for a show and run their 40 times, do they shuttle cones and all that good stuff. Who are First question is who are some prospects you're looking at, and then the second question would be who are some prospects you're looking at for the Chiefs.
Well, I always take a look at like a lot of the offensive and defensive linemen. That's a lot of the work I do for Arrowhead Pride. And obviously this class is so loaded at the top end. Those defensive linemen, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Miles Murphy from Clemson. There's just a lot of guys. There's a lot of defensive ends, defensive tackles in this class that are talented. I really think this is like one of the most loaded defensive tackle classes I've seen. And I know not many people want to hear about quarterbacks in Kansas City, but I've been kind of blown away by CJ Stroud's film a little bit. He's
Mm-hmm.
looked very impressive to me. And that's not even just at the pro day or the combine. That's just in general his film. That game he played against Georgia in the college football Final Four, that was so impressive. His big knock was he doesn't really create outside of the pocket. And all game, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, or not Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith was hurt, but all game long, that Georgia defensive line was blowing the doors down on their offensive line. And he was creating out of the pocket, finding his guys. It was fun to watch now. But as far as some Chiefs guys, I was honestly watching a bunch of tackles. I'm not
Right.
sure if they'll go that way in the first round now. A couple
Mhm.
of defensive ends that I do like. I like Will McDonald from Iowa State. I like Derek Hall from Auburn, who they interviewed Derek Hall at the combine actually, and I like Lucas Van Ness from Iowa. Those are three defensive ends I've been kind of keeping an eye on, been watching pretty closely.
That's a good question about Joe. If Carter does fall, let's say he gets into the teens, maybe in the 20s, because of his legal situations or whatever, would you trade up to get a Jalen Carter?
I probably would, but I don't think he's gonna fall. I mean, I obviously understand it's a very complicated situation he's in right now, and maybe just some of the things the Chiefs have had as far as off the field would scare them away from that.
Mhm.
But some team is still going to take him in the top 10 just
Right.
because when you watch him, you're like, he looks a lot like Chris Jones or Aaron Donald or Javon Hargrave, Deron Payne. You're like, he's going to be one of these top 3, top 4 interior defensive pass rushers at some point.
What would be crazy if he falls to the Eagles because I think they got the ninth or 10th pick, so he gets to go back with his Georgia buddy and Jordan Davis.
Jordan Davis. I love Jordan Davis.
Yeah.
Jordan Davis actually had a couple of nice plays in the Super Bowl, really, after he'd been
Mhm.
hurt a long time. He was one of my favorite prospects a year ago.
Yeah, I loved him. I loved him coming out. He's a big dude, man, and he moves for a
He
big dude.
moves.
He moves around, man. Those guys don't grow on trees, man.
No, they don't.
So, of course, all Chiefs fans, they love offense. We got Patrick Mahomes, so they always want to look at receiver when it comes into the draft. Who are some receivers that you feel like would fit the Kansas City Chief mold?
Well, just looking at some guys who are like maybe just fast guys, Jalen Hyatt, Zay Flowers, they both kind of fit that mold. They're both, shorter, more explosive slot guys from their respective colleges. Zay Flowers might be able to probably the more complete player between those two.
Mhm.
Hyatt really just does one thing well, and that's run the deep ball, but he is absolutely elite at running go patterns. I mean, I saw people comparing him to McCole Hardman. I'm like, I think he's way more developed now than McCole ever got at just running like the straight go. He's got a great ability to track the ball for, when it's high up in the air. And he finally, they finally clicked on offense at Tennessee down there and he started making some plays. So those are some guys I like. And then, uh, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't really know how much he would really fit because the Chiefs kind of have this like the Chiefs are weird at wide receivers since Tyreek left, and they really were even before he was with Andy Reid. They just put guys places, and Andy kind of schemes them open. They kind of come up with ways to get him open, kind of positionless. He'd be more like your traditional X type receiver, though. So I wonder if maybe that'd be something they'd want to have moving forward.
Okay. If there's some mid to like those the second day 2 guys that you like, that maybe the Chiefs, because day 2, day 3 is where the Chiefs really make their bones when they draft. They like those day 3 guys that have the potential, but they don't have a first round grade on them. Are there some guys in that middle round that you like?
Yeah. Are you talking just wide receiver or any position?
You could go any position.
Okay. In the day 2 or 3 rounds at wide receiver, I do like Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss, and I like Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. Mingo, he is a more explosive player, but he really is a pretty good route runner. He's a real stocky. He's like 6'1" or 6'2", like 225. He's a big receiver.
Mm-hmm.
He creates separation well, and he was really pretty underrated. Hutchinson's like 6'3", 205, a bigger body that maybe the Chiefs wouldn't necessarily always use, but he's got some wheels and he's got some nice route running ability for a big guy. And then I think it's possible they take a offensive tackle in the second or third round, just like I was mentioned earlier, creating that depth. I like Darnell Wright from the University of Tennessee. He's a right tackle down there. Really good player, has some good film versus good defensive ends. And I'd also, maybe take a look at Jalen Duncan from Maryland. Very good footwork. He just needs to work on a few things, but I think he's a good tackle prospect as well.
What receivers do you take? I'm assuming you're talking about Darnell Washington. Joe's asking, what receiver do you take before Darnell Washington? He only has 3.
Oh, before Darnell Washington, the tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Which receivers do I take? Probably JSN. I'd probably take Zay Flowers before him also.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one more. I mean, here's my thing about Darnell Washington, though. He doesn't really have great film as like a route runner or anything. But what they can do with him is you just get him the ball in the flat, like a little flat route, or you kind of scheme a way to get him open, and he's going to get you the yak after that.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him early on, though, being more of a blocking tight end, depending on what scheme he ends up in. But his athleticism is going to cause him to, shoot up boards. And I think maybe even the Georgia offense kind of limited what he can do a little bit.
Right. Speaking of tight ends, this is a pretty deep tight end class. Do you see the Chiefs drafting a tight end, maybe grooming that guy to, be the heir apparent, so to say, to a Travis Kelce?
I think it's definitely possible. Obviously they got Noah Gray and Jody Fortson under contract and on the roster, but I still see those guys as more just kind of role players. They fill their role well. Jody, like big body, red zone target. You're gonna get him in some contested catch situations. Maybe you can catch the other team sleeping and he'll, go down the field and have a big chunk play on them. Gray kind of does some like fullback type things. He blocks, he does dirty work. And I guess he's the new Blake Bell as far as taking quarterback sneaks now. But they really don't have another guy on the roster that is like, if Kelce goes down or something happens to Kelce, you're not asking someone to go in there and fill his role, play for play. I think there's definitely a couple guys. I like Sam Laporta from Iowa. Obviously, I like Darnell Washington. We just mentioned him a minute ago. His athletic upside and his ability, he's big boy jumping over people against Oregon out there. And then Dalton Kincaid, he's more of a receiving tight end, doesn't block a whole lot, but he does have very good hands.
What's your views on Zach Kuntz at Old Dominion?
Well, I get the hype around him just because he's got the big body. 6'8", that's a rare football height. He should be suiting up to play power forward for someone at that size. And, I've watched some film on him. I think he's going to be a big-time red zone target. I think he's got that potential to score a lot of touchdowns. It's just when you're that big, sometimes it's hard to run the tightest routes. I don't really see that. But a team is definitely going to be able to use him at some point. I got a list of like my hidden gems, like small school prospects I've been keeping an eye on, kind of watch some film on. He's definitely on that list just because, he tested awesome and he's gigantic.
All right. Now we got my guy Joe in the comment section. He's been big on Bijan Robinson. I don't think we're going to draft him, and I don't think the Chiefs are going to stay. Sorry, Joe, but we're going to stay away from a first-round running back. As talented as Bijan Robinson is, I think he's going to get picked way before we even draft. So, are there some running backs maybe in the later rounds that you like that maybe the Chiefs can pick up?
Yeah, I really actually think this is a pretty underrated running back draft. I think Bijan, he's awesome. I mean, he is one of the best backs to come out in quite a while. And it's crazy how much backs have been devalued in football. But then at the same time, you've seen the Chiefs both times they've won the Super Bowl. It's been with like an older free agent running back and like rookie X, Y, or Z. And then Pacheco's probably a little bit more than just like random rookie or random free agent running back at this point. But, obviously the whole deal with Clyde, that kind of skewered a lot of people's opinions on going running back early. I think it probably did the same for the Chiefs because he said we're going to get 1,000-yard rusher in the 7th round and they could find it. But there are some guys I like. I kind of like Robinson's running mate. I like Roschon Johnson. He's a power back. I think, a combination of him and Pacheco behind Chiefs offensive line, that would just be something, just
Mhm.
pound on them a little bit, go in the opposite direction. Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina. He's probably, I think he ran the fastest 40 time for any running back in that class. He's, got just that speed and explosion that Andy Reid looks for. But yeah, those are just a couple of the guys I've taken a look at. I haven't looked at running backs too closely. I looked at Deuce Vaughn just because he K-State, kind of local area guy. He's good. He's just kind of small.
Yeah, he tested real good though.
Mhm.
He looked good in the combine. So if you get him in the later rounds, I mean, I wouldn't be mad at that. He's probably a good change of pace bet to
Yeah.
Pacheco. He looks like he can catch out the backfield too. So I would definitely look at
And
somebody
that's
like
and that's what the good part of having all those picks at the back end is, if you see a running back you think you like, you got 4 7th round picks, you can burn one of them and no one's gonna get mad at you for it, like kind of like
that.
they did last year.
Yeah, Veach is really good at packaging picks and going to get who he wants. So now let's talk about the secondary. The corners in this draft class, they tested pretty good. It's a lot of fast corners in this. I think it's pretty underrated. Some of these corners are in here. Who are some of the corners that you like in this draft?
Honestly, I haven't watched a ton of the corners outside of a few of the top guys, but I do think that Christian Gonzalez from Oregon,
Mhm.
he is going to be a stud. And it's funny to me that with all the quarterback talk and all of the defensive lineman talk, people have kind of forgotten about him a little bit. Last year was like the cornerback draft. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
Last year you got, you got
Exactly.
Sauce, McDuffie, you got the dude from the Texas went to LSU. You got
Mhm.
all of those guys. I think this guy would be right up here with them. I'd be interested, maybe Veach goes and trades up for him, and you've got two potential all-pro outside corners. I think that's something he would take in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
really, if he got
Yeah.
the opportunity to.
Mhm.
But I haven't watched. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched a ton of them just because they drafted 4 guys last year, and we've still really haven't even seen as much as Josh Williams as I'd like to see personally.
Right. Right. Are there some safeties in this draft that you've seen or watched?
I've watched the Brandon Joseph from Notre Dame. I think he is going to be kind of a Juan Thornhill like guy, honestly. Just kind of when you put on their tape, kind of probably they not, they're second round guys, definitely, but they do some similar things here and there as far as playing kind of that deep ball where I think, Joseph might have him a little bit is the ability to come down and play in the box a little bit more. It's obviously something Brett Veach values. I haven't taken a ton of look at most of the safeties either. I've kind of been, this week I've been kind of caught up in the free agency stuff and the weeks
Mhm.
before that. We do like our draft show every week. We've looked at tackles and tight ends and receivers. We haven't gotten into the secondary guys yet.
Okay. Um, Back to defensive end. Is there a defensive end that you love in this draft that you think that the Chiefs would be able to get? Maybe he falls to the 20s, they could trade up and go get him, and he's a plug and play type guy.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys like that. I like Will McDonald. Will McDonald's one of them. I think, and he was at Iowa State. They play kind of this weird defense. It's like a 3-3-5 stack, but really your defensive ends don't align in the same spot where they'd line up at in the NFL.
Mhm.
But he has a lot of juice and he's got a lot of, length and flexibility. He'd be kind of like a Josh Sweat kind of pass rusher for the Philadelphia Eagles, more of a speed guy, bend guy, and then another kind of local guy from Lee Summit, Missouri, Felix Anduiguzumwa from Kansas State. He's a defensive end. He's another guy in the same boat, kind of just, but he's a little bit bigger. He'll play with more power. Honestly, I think his film compares a little bit to George Karlaftis. He'd be more of like a Steve Spagnuolo type guy. But those are two guys I think are definitely in the Chiefs range, along with a Derek Hall, Auburn defensive end. He kind of played like a linebacker role for them, but really when he was at his best, when he was in a 3-point stance and he was lining up in like a 6 technique out over a tackle, and they can just let him go and rush the passers. So those are 3 guys, and then maybe they get a chance to trade up for someone, maybe be like Miles Murphy or Lucas Van Ness, a guy in that boat.
Okay. How do you feel about Derek Hall?
I like him a lot. Honestly, he reminds me of Frank Clark when Frank Clark first started his NFL career in Seattle. And that's because before Frank had the stomach issues and the nerve issues and all that, he had a lot more power. Like his last 2 seasons in Kansas City, I don't think people kind of remember. Even his first year here, really, he had a lot of power. He could strike people and play with bull rush. He was a lot bigger of a guy, He's running around at like 260, but he's jacked at the same time. Hall is a lot like that. Hall, he ran well, he tested well, he did everything well at the combine. But you see some of these punches that he's putting on these tackles when he gets out of the stance, he's like flattening guys. That's that kind of, Steve Spagnuolo talks about block destruction. He's the kind of guy, he's not going to finesse around a tackle. He's going right through him the entire time. So obviously that aggression and physicality is there in a conference like the SEC. You'd like to see that translate over to the NFL, and he's a guy I think that would fit the mold for what the Chiefs like.
All right. Well, all right, Caleb, man, I appreciate you coming on today, man, and talking to us about free agency and the draft, man. Definitely appreciate you giving us your time, man. Tell everybody where they can find you and where they can follow you at on social media and all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me on. I always love coming on and talking about the Chiefs, talking football in general. You can follow me on Twitter at CJ Scoobs if you want. All of my art, I post a lot of film to my Twitter account, and then I write articles for ArrowheadPride, so you can check those out. And I do a YouTube show once a week where we. I'd say I'd like, if it's the second round and the Chiefs can maybe move up a couple of spots, I'd say, yeah, maybe in the second round, go ahead and get them. We can't get burned like they did, they can't get burned again like they did with the Clyde pick, even though I do think he is going to be much better than Clyde. It's just one of those things. I think Brett might be a little scared to run it back on that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Joe is Bijan Robinson team. He's
Texas guy.
Yeah, he's a hype train on him. So
okay, I like it. But no, I mean, if you guys want to follow me and check out my work, feel free to do so.
Yeah, man, check him out. He's a good follow. He's always putting up film on players and stuff like that. He's got some Jawan Taylor film up right now. So go on, check him out, man. And like I said, man, appreciate you for coming on, man. Definitely got to bring you back on probably after the draft or something to get your thoughts on the draft and what the Chiefs do, man. So definitely have to bring you back on. So, all right, Caleb, man.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too, buddy.
Joe. You and your Bijan Robinson game. It's not happening, man. Let's give it up. He ain't Todd Blackledge. He ain't got to be Todd Blackledge. I'm just telling you. Look, I'm not saying that Bijan Robinson isn't talented. I'm not saying that he's not a instant starter. I just don't think Brett Veach is in that mindset because I do believe that Brett Veach thinks that year 2 Pacheco is going to take a huge leap. I do. I know you're not big on Pacheco like that. I think that he's going to take a huge leap in year 2, and I think that's what Brett Veach thinks. Will they maybe they bring back McKinnon, maybe they get somebody in the later rounds, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Sorry, Joe. I love you, brother, though. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this thing, man. Give a shout out to the sponsor, Every Morning Quarterback. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see the link, emqpodcast.com/locker-room. If you click on that, you'll see the all access locker room. All the podcasts is under the Every Morning Quarterback umbrella. There's a Patriots one, a Chargers one, a 49ers one, a Jets one. But there's also ours, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. if you check us out on there, you click on the link, you'll see all of our episodes, all the recent ones, all the past ones. You'll check out all of us. You can hear us yelling at Joe about Bijan Robinson and how they're not going to pick him. But no, you check out all our episodes. Shout out to Ty. Shout out to Mark. Shout out to Clarence. He wasn't able to make it today, but still shout out to my brother Clarence. But yeah, check us out on there. You can check out their podcast, Every Morning Quarterback. They talk about everything league wide. They talk about they have betting tips. So go ahead, subscribe to their channel and check them out. Shout out to them. And whatever streaming platform that you listen to your podcast on, Arrowhead Chief Podcast is on there, whether it be Spotify, whether it be Stitcher, Breaker, Apple, Google. We are on there. Check us out, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. Hit that subscribe button and check us out. Check us out on YouTube too, if you're not already. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. All of those streaming platforms where we do our lives on. And whatever social media platform that you use, you can find us on there, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We're on there. Check us out. Follow us. We'll follow you. Like I always tell my man Clarence, you know what I'm saying? What do we say? We're not Hollywood over here. Like my man Joe says, we Hollywood though. But for real, we're not Hollywood. We'll follow you back. We'll interact with you. You got questions? You got something you want to talk to us about? You want to ask us anything within reason? Don't ask us no stupid questions because we will talk about you on the show. But if you got a reasonable question, hit us up. We'll answer it. Give us feedback. Whatever you critique, whatever, just talk to us nice. Don't come at us crazy. But if you want us, critique, feedback, questions, anything, something you want us to bring up on the podcast, hit us up, man. We want to give y'all the best Chiefs content that we can give y'all. All right. So with that being said, for me, for Clarence, Arrowhead Chief Podcast, I'm out. Y'all have a good rest of y'all week and enjoy free agency.